Good morning, everybody. Thank you. So my name is Joseph Thompson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of aid.tech. I'm going to give you a bit of story on aid.tech, what we do, how we're using technology to solve some of the world's biggest problems. So what we do and what we believe in is we believe in the core to accessing any service, be it financial, educational, health. It's around digital identity. So we see digital identity as the building block for a person to get access to services. Now, if we look at this here, the World Bank says at least 1.1 billion people lack a digital identity or legal identity. So we see, how can you solve the problem of financial inclusion if people don't even exist? How can a bank verify a person? How can a government distribute welfare entitlements to a person if they don't see that they exist? And if you're familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations, there's 17 targets that have been signed by 194 countries since 2015, the new Millennium Goals. And they tackle things. So goal 16.9 says by 2030, everybody needs to have a legal identity. So that to me is a massive opportunity. There's 1 billion people plus market for the next 10 to 12 years at least. So what we believe is people accessing services, the basics of financial inclusion is around identity. And we looked at this in the developing world. And we were the first company in the world in 2015 to use blockchain to deliver international aid to Syrian refugees on behalf of the Red Cross and the Irish government. And every single cent was traceable because they could see where the money was going and how individuals were spending it. So we focus on everything that we build is around the end user. So we work with our clients, banks, development banks, and we say, what are the user's needs? And if you see what's happening with the big tech corporates, one of the most important commodities in our eyes is clean and trusted data over the next 10 years. So very simply, we let end users sign up for an app. And they will fill in their name, age, address, any formal identification, but they do not self-provision themselves. The self-provisioning comes from the banks and governments who are going to distribute these services. So essentially, we're using blockchain, what we call the transparency engine. It's permissionless trust. Governments know who they're dealing with. The end user owns their own data, not us. We're European. We follow the GDPR rules, so we don't get end user data. And then that side, we said, okay, if we can solve this for the end users, how do we solve it for the banks and for the government? Banks obviously want to lower the cost of customer acquisition. Governments want to have better service provision to people that they service. So we built it around unique identifiers. And we recently had our identity verified by the W3C, Worldwide Consortium. Where basically, a unique identifier is where an end user owns the private keys. They own their PIN on their mobile phone. So an end user decides what services that they can access. So now the credential from the bank or from the government determines who they can actually onboard, lowers the cost of KYC, lowers the cost of AML, and that end user is building a data credit profile based on every transaction. So the game changer is not blockchain. The game changer is around clean and trusted data and what governments and banks can actually do with that. And then they can access services. How we work, we're doing projects now currently with the Singapore government, big growth opportunity in Asia, where on the capital flows, so money coming from governments and from banks, they verify the end beneficiaries. And using our platform, they create digital assets. We don't use crypto, okay? So everybody can relax. We're not using Bitcoin or Ethereum. So they create digital assets, they give it a monetary value, and they top a person up. Now a person has an identity that's been verified, and then they have the availability to spend and access different services. And I'll talk about some of the groundbreaking use cases that we've actually done. And our business model is, it's a SaaS-based business model. We call it TAS, Transparency as a Service. So we're charging banks for whatever they deliver to end beneficiaries. We never charge the end beneficiary. We want them to actually own their own data. We're providing the platform that connects banks, predominantly governments, in with end beneficiaries. So an end beneficiary has an identity which can now access all these different services that banks and governments, when you think about governments, they have to send this money. This money is going somewhere. And if it's not going in a transparent place, it's going somewhere that's leaked. Fraud, corruption, and so on. So I'll give you some of the projects that we're doing. We've just won 2 contracts from the 2 biggest development banks in the world. One with the Islamic Development Bank and one with the Asian Development Bank. So this project here is funded by the Japanese government and the Asian Development Bank, and it's a $408 million loan to rebuild livelihoods for people in the Philippines. So they're using our identity platform, and then they're going to top people up with welfare, education, medical entitlements, where they can actually see if somebody goes for a health visit. They can actually see if somebody misses a welfare payment. So it's a zero-sum game. You either see if a transaction happens or if it doesn't. And again, it's all about the end user. This project here, we're starting off with about 9,000 people, and over the 2 years, we're scaling to 300,000 people as part of a 408 million package. So if you're looking at the 1.1 billion people who lack identity, they're not just lacking identity, they're lacking fintech services, so remittances, welfare, donations, aid, whatever it may be. Another project that we did this with the Serbian government. So SDG target 10C is to bring remittances below 3%. And we did this. We brought remittances from 7.8% to below 3%. And how it worked was the government verified the identity of the people, and then people in Germany, people in Switzerland sent money back to their family members. Governments loved it because they are lowering the cost of welfare spend. But they determined how the money could be spent on groceries, utilities, and so on. There's a project that we're doing, a really, really cool project, and it's one of the reasons I'm in the US here. We're working with an organization called St. Vincent de Paul, which look after victims of natural disasters in the US, who a lot don't actually have any basic financial services. So they give out money to these people, and they go tell them to spend it, but there's no data. So now they're giving these people an identity where they can actually top people up and tell them to spend it in certain supermarkets. It's all about clean data. It's all about clean data. I won't go through the various points. And that's what the future is. We won Game Changer of the Year award from the IMF for fighting corruption. We won MasterCard Company of the Year for financial inclusion. We're scaling quite quickly, so we're raising our Series A now. We're starting it off in the next week or two. And we have a big opportunity to focus on Southeast Asia. That's my contact details. I'll be around. I think I'm the only Irish guy I've heard, so you can see me later on. Come over, please say hello. I'm happy to chat further. Thank you.